Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing Roboute Guilliman's continued conflict of faith, as he's confronted by worship within his own gene line. A spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Dawn of Fire series novel The Silent King by author Guy Hayley. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that out the way, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Okay, so ever since Roboute Guilliman awoke within the current 40k universe, he's certainly had no small amount of issues to contend with. One of the biggest and most inescapable being the Imperium's faith in the Emperor. The God Emperor. Roboute is from a time of the Imperial truth, where science and logic dominated humanity, where the law was fundamental, that there are no gods, and worship and faith of any kind were to be eradicated. And so you can imagine how appalled and confused he was to return to an Imperium quite simply obsessed with it, dominated by it, and worse still, all in regards to his father, a man who spent his life declaring he was no such thing. And we've seen Guilliman dealing with this issue constantly, forced to have to appease the ecclesiarchy by having a representative of theirs accompany him on campaign, work with the religious orders of the Sisterhood, and not to mention try and come to terms with his father's apparent ascension, the eruptions and sightings of his power across the galaxy. And this is all just one aspect of the nightmare that the Primarch has returned to find, as he does everything he can to try and save humanity. No wonder the poor guy has visibly aged in the few years since his return. However, I was really intrigued to see another conversation on this topic within the recent Silent King novel. A conversation where, despite it all, Guilliman appeared to be the most relaxed yet when discussing it, and if anything, the most open too. And this conversation took place after his escape from the confrontation against the Necron forces, aboard the newly refurbished and cleansed Macrag's Honour, where he had called Captain Messinius of the White Consuls to name him Warden of the Nephilim region, making it his responsibility to try and contain the Necron threat. It's a pretty brief little interaction, Messinius still in pain fresh from his Primaris surgery, but seeing Guilliman in private conversation with just his sons, those he trusts, you can definitely see how far more comfortable he is in having these conversations, having to be less guarded and wary. Indeed, the encounter begins by showing Guilliman meditating, with only Sicarius present, as he always is. These things troubled the Primarch, and so they troubled Sicarius. If only I had not pursued Fulgrim, the Primarch had said. If only I had not broken the legions. If only, if only, if only. It concerned Sicarius that the last great hope of humanity should feel this way, to look upon the Imperium and see only the terminal wounds of his mistakes. There was a polite cough behind them from Guilliman's equerry, Tanis. The Primarch had started the habit of taking on promising Primaris Space Marines to act as his personal servants, one at a time, for no more than a year, soon after the Crusade had begun. One day they might become leaders of mankind, and take humanity into more peaceful times. Realistically, he was forging them into capable war leaders. It never did to abandon old dreams entirely. What are we without hope, the Primarch said aloud. My lord, Tanis said. Nothing. Old hopes die hard, he said. There are new ones to take their place. You have something for me. Lord Lieutenant Messinius is here, as you requested. Is that so? Said Guilliman. The armour of fate purred as he turned away from the window. Already? Tanis looked momentarily uncomfortable. You have been in meditation for 2 hours, my lord. This took Guilliman by surprise. Sicarius had noted the Primarch's sense of time often escaped him years ago. Has he been waiting long? Not long, Lord Regent. Send him in, and apologise for the delay, if you would. How is he? In pain. Then I shall meet him in my librarium. And this is a very common scene with Roboute of late. The moments of reflection within his own faults, mulling over his past mistakes, or at least what he feels are his past mistakes. I mean, could he really have stopped the decline of the Imperium? Could he have prevented the rise of the Ecclesiarchy? I'm not so sure. However, still, Guilliman losing himself in the meditation, not knowing hours have passed, that is a little surprising and concerning, as I think you subtly feel from his servant here, because I think it speaks to the monumental level of stress he is under, that not even a Primarch was made to bear, which is why he needs his brothers returned, because even in remaining Lord Commander, just knowing he has some of his brothers out there, sharing the burden, would provide such an untold measure of relief for him. And you just get the little mannerisms that make Guilliman who he is here too. One of the more human of the Primarchs. Asking them to apologise for the delay. Asking how Messinius is. Considering that he is in pain. And then choosing the librarium as a result. You'd assume the most comfortable place to have their meeting. Or at least the most private. And these are just little things that so many of Guilliman's brothers wouldn't do, or even consider, each for their various reasons. But it's a great little example of the Primarch and man that Roboute is, that he always has been, and it's reinforced after Messinius is introduced, racked with pain following his Primaris surgery. They went through into the main body of the librarium. A few moments later, Messinius entered. He was without armour. Sicarius doubted Messinius could have worn it even if he had wished to. Surgical scars crisscrossed his body, following every major muscle group, as though he had been pulled apart and put back together. The cuts were clean, the stitches neat, but the number of wounds meant he looked little like himself. Some of that unfamiliarity would decrease with the swelling, when the bruises that blotched every inch of skin faded. Some changes were permanent. He was bigger, more heavily muscled. He moved awkwardly. Sicarius thought only pride stopped him from employing a cane. The rapid transformation of the Rubicon procedure took a heavy physical toll, even on the enhanced constitutions of the Adeptus Astartes. Vitrion, you are healing, Guilliman said. Barely, my lord, said Messinius. His voice was a gravelly whisper. I am told the discomfort will pass soon enough. It will. I have seen it many times. Soon you will be mightier than you ever were. Rejoice, for you join the ranks of those you have led for these last years. Thanks to call, said Messinius. He seemed uncertain. Sicarius had an insight that Messinius was not completely comfortable with the changes the Archmagos had made. I owe him thanks twice over. I would be dead without his monster. Then it is good call breaks the rules sometimes, said Guilliman. I have known many good men undergo the crossing. It rarely brings permanent disadvantage, should the subject survive. Do you know why it is called the Rubicon? No, my lord. The strain in Messinius' voice made Sicarius properly look at him. Messinius was in no state to receive a lecture. He was trembling with the effort of standing to attention. His muscles had been filleted to take the sinew coils. These were cybernetic implants and could not be grown in situ. He must be in unbearable pain. Sicarius could have sworn he felt the heat coming off Messinius generated by the Belisarian furnace, one of the new implants which granted Space Marines remarkable powers of recuperation. He would be working hard to heal all his many hurts, and that had a price of its own. Messinius should not have been on his feet. Sicarius's hand shifted on his sword. He had yet to undergo the process. He had known men who had died doing so, and looking at Messinius only made him more cautious. Guilliman too saw Messinius's pain, and abandoned his story. Ancient history, truly ancient. I will relay the tale another time. Guilliman attempted a smile. He gestured towards one of the chairs around his conference table, off at the side of the room. We have things to discuss, you and I. Again, it's just a small little thing, but the way Guilliman can't help but go into a lecturing story, only to stop himself when realising Messinius's discomforts. It just sums up Guilliman perfectly. And on a side note, now it's really another reminder of how the Rubicon procedure has become commonplace. That the risks are undoubtedly still there, as shown by Sicarius making note of Messinius's pain, but that it's just another example of someone crossing the Rubicon, far from the rarefied procedure that it used to be, that it is now commonplace, and the firstborn sons become rarer and rarer to see. However, we now get to the main reason for this topic today, as their conversation moves on to Messinius's surprising faith. "Sit," said Guilliman to Messinius. "Be at ease. I see now that I called you too early. I apologise. I am so caught up in this endless war that I forget the better impulses of humanity. It is only pain, my lord. It is of no consequence. To serve the Emperor is to embrace pain, and put it aside for his glory. Your chapter worshipped the Emperor, did they not?" "They did," said Messinius. "Unusual among my sons. It seemed obvious to us. He is so mighty, he serves as a god to mankind. You have not mentioned it before." Guilliman helped him to a chair, and pulled it out for him. Messinius sat with evident relief. Sicarius remained where he was, watching from the shadows. "We are not the Black Templars, my lord. Our veneration of the Emperor is similar in form to the cults of most other chapters. It is only the nature of our faith that differs." Guilliman pulled out his own enormous chair. The scrape of its feet upon the stone floor echoed long around the empty bookshelves. "It is a fundamental difference," the Primarch said. "It is. You do not approve." Guilliman looked away from the battered Lord Lieutenant. He let out a thoughtful breath. "I do not know. My father, the Emperor, was deadly earnest that no man should worship him as a god. He was a complex being, hard to see. Do you understand? I am not sure I follow your meaning. If you looked at him, you were never sure you were seeing the same person you saw the time before. To different men, he appeared as different things. We pursued his policy, the imperial truth, with dogged fanaticism. I see this new world and I wonder if we were any better than the religions we destroyed. In the end, the imperial truth was a cover for a lie. There were gods after all, or things that called themselves gods. When I saw him again after my rebirth, in the palace, what I saw was so far from human." "You have never spoken to me about what happened that day," said Messinius. "It is not for sharing. I will say no more. And you should be glad of that," said the Primarch. Sicarius noted that the Primarch had not confided in him either. All he knew was that what the Primarch had seen in the throne room troubled him more than any of the rest of it. The Primarch rested his immense gauntlets upon the table. So I do not know what I know, and if I am to be true to my ignorance, then who am I to judge the beliefs of other men? He smiled again. Now, I find this hugely interesting. As a reminder, this scene is set before the Dark Imperium trilogy, before Guilliman was faced with the undisputable evidence the Emperor is indeed acting across the galaxy. However, you can see how far more relaxed on the matter he is here, amongst the company of his own sons, before those events of the Dark Imperium trilogy, particularly Godblight. We know he was absolutely appalled and disgusted by the worship of his father upon his return, and privately at times still is, furious at times, as again seen later in the Dark Imperium trilogy. Yet here, with Massinius, you can feel his reluctance to judge him, to damn, that inner conflict he has on the matter, and how it really all boils down to what he saw within the throne room. For sure, the Imperial truth was used to deny the ruinous powers, but them being gods is merely a personal opinion. What is a god to one is merely a powerful entity to another, and the same exact mindset can be used on the Emperor, and indeed is. And that's the fundamental problem, I think. If Guilliman had returned and found the Emperor as he left him, silent and kept alive only by the Golden Throne, perhaps he'd be far more certain and anti-worship here. But it's because the Emperor has become so much more, so vastly departed from the man unto a god, that Guilliman just doesn't know what to do. When I saw him again after my rebirth, in the palace, what I saw was so far from human. And yet this is the same being who demanded the Imperial truth, denied adamantly that he is a god, and so Guilliman is just completely at a loss, unknowing of what to do, what the best course of action is, adhere to what the Emperor always told him, or embrace what has appeared to have transpired. And so this is how you can see Guilliman go on to read the Book of Lorgar later, because he is seeking the answers himself, the right course to take. And we know he's even discussed trying to heal the Emperor too, to get him to be able to leave the Golden Throne. But what we don't know is why. Is it because Guilliman desperately seeks to return him to the human he was before, for the Emperor's benefit? Is it for Guilliman's? Or is it to remove the worship of faith? Or even some other reason? That's a question yet to be answered. And until we get that answer, I think we'll continue to see this conflicted Guilliman. The one who, as he says himself, doesn't know whether to approve of the White Consul's worship or not. Doesn't know whether to judge. Will the reunion of El Johnson help Guilliman in that regard? Time will tell. But it is definitely possible. As though, like Guilliman, appalled at the notion of his father being a god, El Johnson did accept to himself the Emperor is akin to one, and worshipping him is preferable to worship of the Chaos Gods. That perhaps in some way his psychic power has ascended to godhood, despite it all. It's absolutely a topic I expect the brothers to discuss, and it's one that I expect to see this more open Guilliman in that conversation too. Finally able, with a fellow brother, to just confess and say it like it is. To have someone who knows what they really fought for, what their father was truly like in life. However, the conundrum on the Emperor's divinity and his worship is definitely going to be a central issue until then regardless. And indeed long after. Because the inescapable fact remains the Emperor is the most important person in the galaxy, with an entire species dependent on his sacrifice. And whether Guilliman likes it or not, the Imperium of mankind revolves around worship of him. And so maybe seeing the worship and faith spreading amongst his own gene line is just one more step on Guilliman's journey to accepting his father, the Emperor, has become a god. But as always everyone, what do you think? What do you think of Guilliman not wanting to cast judgment on Messinius here? Is it because it's one of his own sons? Or is it because he is simply truly confused within, that he doesn't know the right course to take? And where do you think this journey is going to ultimately lead to? Will we see a Guilliman and L. Johnson publicly embracing the faith of the Emperor, despite privately being aghast at it? Or could they even use it themselves, realizing that accepting the faith enables the Emperor to act? Or is this building to a monumental event that once and for all sees Guilliman realize the Emperor was right? That the powers who claim godhood are the true enemy? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.